This is a story from, let me see, Dad was born in 1913. This would be 1923. Now, my grandparents settled in Osage County in Oklahoma, where they built their farm, and that's northeast Oklahoma, very, very hilly country. And it had not been a kind year for the crops, it had not been a kind year for food, and it had not been a kind year for income. So Grandpa and Dad, who was all of 10 years old, they set, and he was the eldest child, they set out with their guns to go hunting. They went for a week of camping and hunting to see what they could bring home to help fill the larder for the winter. Well, it was on about 4 days into this trip, and it was a late afternoon, and it had been a disappointing day. All they got was a couple of rabbits and a squirrel or two. Hardly enough to put in the bag, but, you know, hungry enough not to leave them laying there. And it was getting cloudy. It was October. It was a bright October day. They'd gone hunting, and they'd had a couple of really bright days. But it started to cloud over that afternoon, and the winds had picked up, and it looked like rain was on the way. So Grandpa and Dad were looking for a place to camp, when all of a sudden, wow! Wow! Came the screams. And the hills of northeast Oklahoma are full of black panthers. And that indeed was a panther scream. And though Grandpa tended to be a bit grumpy and go ahead, and Daddy would dawdle behind so as not to get yelled at, he scooted up to Grandpa, and Grandpa said, "Stay close, Earl. The panthers are out." Now, when the panthers are out, you don't just look around, you have to look up, because they like to climb in the trees and they can jump you from above. Fortunately, that sound was far enough away that Grandpa knew full well they were still safe, but they had to keep moving, trying to find a place. Now they had to have a shelter out of the rain, and because they're not going to be able to keep a fire going all night to keep the panthers away. Because sure enough, it started spitting a little. So Grandpa said, "Come on, let's go. Let's see if we can find some hunter's cabin. We got to find something." And Dad moved as fast as he could and stayed very close. All of a sudden, wow! Much louder. That panther scream was so close, Grandpa stopped and said, "Hold up." Boom! 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 He fired some shots. Silence. No screaming. "That'll hold him for a while, Earl. Let's keep moving." It got darker and darker as the clouds gathered and the rain started coming down seriously. Dad was shivering, not just from the cold and the wind, but the thought of those panthers coming down on him. Grandpa kept moving and said, "Wait a minute, I see a clearing up here, Earl. You see anything?" And Dad scooted ahead, and across the clearing he said, "Dad, I think that's a cabin." Whoa! It was so close, Grandpa shot 4. Bam, 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 bam. Silence, but he knew it wouldn't be long. That rain was coming down hard. The panthers didn't mind. They could move and they could see. He grabbed Dad's hand and he pulled him across that clearing. And before they knew it, they were up on a rickety porch. And there it was. It was a cabin, all right. The door was sagging. But Grandpa dragged Pop in there. He pulled that door up and he pushed it into the doorway. He found a piece of wood and he put it across and held it as best he could. And a couple of the windows, there were windows to shoot out. It was a hunter's cabin. And he found some wood inside and he poked it up against the windows, trying to keep those panthers out. Thank goodness there was a fireplace, dusty and nasty looking as it was, and there was some old furniture, and Grandpa said, "Earl, get busy, we've got to break up the furniture." But Dad was cuddled and snugged up against him. "Spiders, spiders!" And sure enough, there were webs everywhere. And my dad hated spiders. He'd been bit by a black widow and lost a chunk of skin out. And he knew how nasty it felt. He says, "Earl, just take this stick and gather the webs." Now that's the last thing Dad wanted to do, but he did as he was told. Grandpa was not to be refused. So he gathered all those webs around and threw it into the fire, which Grandpa had gone over to start while he was busy. And then they broke up some more furniture, and they found over in the dusty corner just a few logs that had been left from somebody previous. So they had enough. They had enough to stay warm. And they pulled out some cold jerky and biscuits, some dry hardtack, and Grandpa poured some water. That was dinner. Well, they were tired. It might not be 9 o'clock at night yet, but it had been a long day. And Grandpa had them take their jackets off and dry them near the fire. They laid their bedrolls out, and down they laid. Grandpa snored a bit. But Dad all of a sudden heard, "Wow! Wow!" That really scared him, and he snuggled closer to Grandpa. Grandpa all of a sudden sat up. There was a light out there, a light. That meant there was another person out there with the Panthers. "Earl, move now. I've got to open that door." And so he moved the wood off and took that door and set it aside. And sure enough, through the woods there was a lantern coming. But that person wasn't alone. "Wow! Wow! Over here!" Grandpa yelled, but he knew he wouldn't be heard. That light was still too far away. But thank goodness it was still swinging toward the cabin. It was getting closer and closer to the cabin. So he waited and he waited a little bit, and wow! The Panthers were getting near that lantern. That meant that person was in danger. "Over here!" So what Grandpa did, he went bam! He fired a shot up in the air so the person would know where to go. So the lantern swung closer and closer and closer, coming out of the woods. And wow! And Grandpa, bam, bam, shot another couple of shots. Panthers quieted. The lantern came closer and quicker and closer and quicker. Dad was holding on to Grandpa's leg, looking out there. "Are you going to make it? Are you going to make it, Pa?" "Yeah, they're not going to come after those shots." And here it comes closer and closer and closer until it comes into the clearing. And Grandpa uttered a swear word under his breath, turned as white as a sheet, and he yanked Dad back in that cabin and slammed the door across. Dad said, "What are you doing? That person will be eaten by panthers." "Earl, get yourself back in your bedroll." There wasn't a person. "What?" Grandpa sat there and shook. Dad leaned against him all night. Grandpa kept that gun across his lap, leaned up against the wall of that cabin. And sure enough, they got out there the next morning, and in the muddy clearing in front of that cabin, there were no footprints. But in the middle of that, there sat a burnt-out lantern. And they searched like the good hunters they were back into those woods, and never did they find a footprint. And from that day forward, Grandpa avoided that area of the woods. And Dad swore that was a true story. And the next time I asked, and the next time I asked, he didn't change it. So I'm reckoning that was the Panther and the lantern and the ghost of God knows who.